here from Providence. Always get an awesome turnout for Providence. We've got 498 players. The density of really good players here is very high because we are here in the Northeast. So this is going to be a lot of fun to cover all weekend long. And you can see here round two, the Duke, Wolchesky, we're underway. Windswept Heath is how things will start. For Reid, he's got a Temple of Enlightenment.
I'm a big Providence fan. I'm a big fan of cities and areas that have a little brother complex because I grew up in New Jersey, which is the ultimate little brother complex in the United States.
Very true.
And you know, the Boston to Providence parallel, very close to the New York City to New Jersey parallel. So I
didn't really realize that people in Providence, I didn't realize how close Boston is and how much of an effect Boston has on the city.
Yeah, no, it's like a small Boston satellite.
I was wearing some Cleveland Cavalier apparel as the Cavaliers will be doing battle against the Boston Celtics in the playoffs, and a lot of people were not happy with my choice of clothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is definitely, sports-wise, still a Boston town.
Though everyone who did give me some harsh words admit they had no chance to win.
Yeah.
Which is correct, of course. So I'm glad that at least they're realistic. As here is the mighty Nyx Weaver. Reid going to take a look. We can do the same. Don't see this one very often. And it is just a one-of here in Wolchesky's deck. Reid's going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand here. Perhaps we'll see a counterspell for the Nyx Weaver.
Looking for something that can counter this. Does not appear that he can counter on turn two. He does have 2 copies of Last Breath in his main deck here. Anticipate as well, so he could have some plays.
Well, here is Anticipate. So Reid will take a look at the top 3 cards, take one of those with him. There is Nyx Weaver, the ability to exile itself to return target card from your grave to your hand. So kind of like a Den Protector, kind of like an Eternal Witness. There's a lot going on with that card.
It's a slow burn, but we've seen this in mid-range graveyard value decks before.
Yes. Going to turn over 2 cards. Wolchesky, Windswept Heath, and Llanowar Waste go to the graveyard. Commune with the gods is the draw. And it's time to attack. 2 damage will come across. Duke's going to go down to 17. Again, we have seen Wolchesky have quite a bit of success on the Open Series before. And has won a Legacy Open in 2012 here in this building, as there is Tassiger.
Combo deck.
That is a combo. Dissolve is going to stop the combo. Top card will go to the bottom from the Scribe.
But this feels like this should be a solid matchup for Reid, at least game 1. Pure control decks generally are very solid against mid-range strategies. It's going to be hard for Elliott to piece together enough pressure and disruption to kill Reid before Reid's better tools take over. Dissolve, one of the best cards you can have against mid-range strategies.
Absolutely, as there's a Radiant Fountain. Gain 2 life, and now here's a Perilous Vault. So a card you typically only see in blue-black strategies, you're going to find here in a blue-white one.
2 copies in the main deck.
Hero's Downfall and Sandstorm Citadel are turned over from the Nyx Weaver. The draw here is Soul of Innistrad.
Clunky.
To say the least, as here comes Nyx Weaver yet again. Duke going to go back down to 17, of course, getting 2 life in that Radiant Fountain, undoing a hit from the Nyx Weaver already. Wolchesky with 3 copies of Siege Rhino in hand right now. There's also that Commune, that Soul of Innistrad, and a Hero's Downfall.
But these are the kind of hands that highlight the problem that mid-range decks have against blue-white control and similar decks. Even if Elliott's making his land drops, it's very hard for him to generate enough pressure without getting blown up by sweepers. Dancing that dance is really hard. Control decks can overpower this stuff and ignore sweepers, and beatdown decks can win before the sweepers get online. Elliott, it's very hard for him to do either of those things.
Commune with the Gods is going to take a Sylvan Caryatid, Temple of Silence, Windswept Teeth, a Johnny Mentor of Heroes, and Murderous Cut will go to the graveyard. Here's an Anticipate. Perhaps Reid looking for a land to play this turn. It's interesting where the camps are at on Anticipate, too, in control strategies. You mentioned a little earlier in the broadcast, Adrian Sullivan going without Anticipate in his blue-black control deck, where other players did have it.
I do not have the expertise to know the nuances between the lists and be able to articulate the reason why. I think a lot of it has to do with how jammed up you think you're going to be on the second turn. Once you're playing with a lot of negates and Bile Blights, I think the cost of playing with Anticipate goes up because you have something to do on your second turn already. The more that you're saying go on turn 2, the better it is, and Reid's deck is saying go on turn 2 a lot.
Reid will play a land there in Radiant Fountain and pass the turn back. Couple of cards get turned over yet again there for Wolchesky, Sidisi, Undead Vizier, and a Johnny, Mentor of Heroes. There's the attack from the Nyx Weaver. Temple of Malady is the land. That top card going to go to the bottom from the scry. Wolchesky's hand still incredibly clunky at this point.
And this is the weird spot that these decks get into where Elliott knows he doesn't have enough pressure in play to win the game just with the Nyx Weaver. But he can't add so much to the board that he loses everything to the Perilous Vault. So he needs to add more without adding too much. And that's very hard to do.
Reid very quickly just plays an island and passes the turn back. Wolchesky might be interested in sacrificing that Nyx Weaver to get something back, but he'll just let it stay in play. Turn over 2 more cards here in Plains. And Sansep Citadel on the upkeep thanks to the trigger. The draw for the turn is a Satyr Wayfinder.
It doesn't make a lot of sense for Elliott to sacrifice the Nyx Weaver right now unless he's getting a spell. If there's a Thoughtseize in the graveyard that's attractive, but just getting some threat, it takes his whole turn to cast, and he's got plenty of stuff to do with his hand. And it doesn't really do anything about the Perilous Vault that's the real problem right now. So he's just gotta just keep trucking in for 2 here, because I don't think he has a better line of play.
Siege Rhino is really the first real threat of the game here for Wolchesky. So we'll see if Duke has any interest in taking care of this. If he does have a counterspell in hand, or perhaps he just gets it off the table with the Perilous Vault. We'll see what Reid wants to do, as he does let it resolve.
Yeah, the Vault is a very nice insurance policy.
Well, dig through time's not so bad. Take a look at those 7 cards. Of course, Reid will take 2 with him.
And Reid's unlikely to get burned out in this sort of game. Really, it's only Siege Rhino that can do that. So he can take his lumps here.
Yep.
He can go down pretty low to sculpt the perfect hand, fire off the Perilous Vault when Elliott's board is advanced enough or Reid's light total gets low enough, and then Reid can try to take over with the leftovers.
Reid has begun casting, it seems, Dig Through Time across all formats now. Of course, in his take on Miracles, he's got Dig Through Time in there basically all the time now.
And a lot of them, too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 3 copies typically are in his list.
It's a very powerful card. Reid going to organize his mana a little bit here. Perhaps we'll see End Hostilities, and we will. So that'll clear away those 2 creatures. Wants to leave that Perilous Vault in play, maybe as a last option.
It's a great insurance policy. It's also really nice in the event that Elliott has Whip of Erebos in his list, which all signs point to that's going on. He has Nyx Weaver in his list. It looks like a very graveyard-centric build. So the End Hostilities, very good at answering the current board, and the Perilous Vault, a very good insurance policy against something that comes into play that you don't want to go to the graveyard because Perilous Vault exiles, or if it's a different card type altogether, like Whip of Erebos.
Temple of Malady was land number 5 there for Wolchesky. Top card did go to the bottom. Here's Siege Rhino. Reid going to very quickly sacrifice his Flooded Strand.
And Reid with 1 copy of Nullify in the list and 2 copies of Disdainful Stroke. This is a huge tempo swing here for Reid if he's able to answer this follow-up Rhino on Elliott's turn, on tap with all of his mana, and Elliott with no board.
Well, here is 2 mana. There is Disdainful Stroke. So that tempo swing has occurred. And now Reid gets to untap with Perilous Vault in play. 7 lands, nothing on the table from his opponent. You have to imagine he's got to be looking to turn the corner here as soon as he's just going to pass the turn back. Wolchesky will draw a copy of Tassiger. It's actually not a bad draw because that allows him to play 2 spells in 1 turn here.
This is the problem is that 2 spells in 1 turn is not great against the Perilous Vault.
This is true.
At some point, Elliott does have to just push this thing off the table.
Yep.
But this is not the ideal way to do it.
And he's not going to be able to do it, I believe, 1 threat at a time. I think he's got to do it with at least 2 threats.
I agree, especially with Reid. You know, he's got a bunch of mana, a lot of cards in his hand. I think Elliott can probably sense that the game's going quite poorly for him. But Elliott doesn't really get to start playing the game until he gets the Perilous Vault on the table. It's got to start there.
Yep. Siege Round will be placed onto the stack. I think Wolchesky is considering his Tasker as well as Siege Rhino has resolved. You see the life totals here, 18-8. Reid going to cast another copy of Dig Through Time. Elliott not willing to play his Tasker this turn as well. So Reid again will take a look at the top 7 cards, take 2 with him. The rest will go to the bottom of the deck. Negate among the options Duke has here as he'll consult his hand.
Winning this 1 threat at a time is going to be very hard for Elliott. But also winning it 2 threats at a time is going to be hard too.
Yeah. And you mentioned too that, this isn't a matchup where Reid can really get burned out. And this is the 3rd Siege Rhino that Elliott's cast this game as well. So he doesn't have to really worry about a 4th one, for example.
Reid still has to respect the possibility of the Siege Rhinos coming back.
Sure.
Because Elliott has shown a lot of graveyard matters sort of stuff right now. So you have to respect with Varabos and maybe some other weird cards as well. But Elliott has played a lot of his Siege Rhinos. So he's going to have to resolve some graveyard-centric way to get them back.
Radiant Fountain into Elspeth, Sun's champion. And that's going to blow up old Siege Rhino. Pass that turn back. Wolchesky will draw. Carry out of the draw. A little late to the party.
Bit late. And Reid still with 2 mana up. That can be a Nullify, 1 copy in the main. Disdainful Stroke, we've already seen 1. There's 2 in the main deck. Also 2 copies of Negate. So a lot of counters in Reid's list.
And now Wolchesky has to try to work through not only that powerful Planeswalker, but the Perilous Vault that's been there the entire time. Which is obviously a pretty tough thing to do.
Exactly. The consolation here is that, maybe he can get in a spot where he can make a board that's powerful enough to overwhelm Elspeth, and then Reid is forced to sacrifice the Perilous Vault and clean up the board that way. But that's going to be really hard to do, especially if Reid's just sitting on another counter spell right now to handle some big play from Elliott.
Satyr Wayfinder turned over 3 copies of Course of Grufix and a Tasigur, so no lands there. Looks like Wolchesky's going to take 1 to play Hero's Downfall, and he will, to go after Elspeth. We'll see if Reid has some way to protect it.
Or even if he cares to. I mean, Reid might just be saying, okay, that's fine. It still allows me to sit on Perilous Vault. Looks like it's worth a negate at least, but Reid could have also let that resolve even if he had a way to fight over it in his hand.
Yep. 3 soldiers here. And then a passing of the turn. Wolchesky. Looks like he's going to play his Tasigur now. Though he does have some options in hand. We can't forget about that Soul of Innistrad that's been hanging out for some time now. That might be the kind of card that forces Reid's hand with the Perilous Vault.
Yeah, I suspect it's a little too slow to the party at this point. With Reid having looked at so many cards, I think it's reasonable that he's sitting on more counter spells, and it's going to take Elliott a lot of time in the event that he gets countered to get the cards back into his hand with the Soul Trigger and then deploy them efficiently. But it is one of the cards, just in terms of raw power, that might be able to catch him up.
There's a forest. Reid going to sacrifice his Flooded Strand. Just another card in the graveyard for his dig through times. He'll get himself a Plains. Duke down to 9 here. Wolchesky at 17. So Duke has done a really nice job of stabilizing. And now he's looking to try to turn the corner and win this thing, while also making sure that there's nothing too threatening that Wolchesky can do. Reid going to organize his mana a little bit. Might be time for another dig, and it is. So he'll remove his Flooded Strand. A couple other cards here as well for the delve on dig through time. Take a look at 7 yet again. Take 2 with him.
And these are the spots that it's just so hard for mid-range decks to power through this.
Yep.
This is just a great demonstration of what control decks get to do, game 1 at least, against mid-range decks that don't have Thoughtseize.
It's no Sphinx's revelation, but it feels pretty close sometimes.
Yeah, it's the same recipe though. It's just very hard for Elliott to cobble together enough pressure.
See the Unwritten and Commune with the Gods get turned over. Reid's going to take a look at Wolchesky's graveyard, I think, here. See the Unwritten is notable. Just 1 in Wolchesky's deck list, but it's certainly nice information to have.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think Reid would sideboard out any of his counters in this kind of matchup, but now I think Negate and Disdainful Stroke stay in / more copies come in, if anything.
So Reid going to give Commune with the Gods. That was a Tasigur activation, of course.
Commune makes it likely that Elliott's going to flip over more dead weight to further blunt the impact of this Tasigur.
Here is the Commune. You got a Soul, another Commune, an Urborg, a Sandstorm Citadel, and a Windswept Heath.
It's also conceivable that Elliott's at risk of getting decked in this game, too. I mean, I think that Reid's likely to be able to win with Elspeth or something else in time, but Elliott has flipped over a lot of his deck, and he's very far away from being able to apply any sort of pressure to Reid. So that's another thing to look out for.
It is certainly within the realm of possibility.
Yep. I think just a handful of Dissolves and Elspeth is going to end up burying Elliott here, is my guess. But it's possible that Elliott runs out of the library as well.
3 more Soldier Tokens. Reid has 9 of those things in play, building towards an Elspeth Ultimate here. One thing you will not find in Wolchesky's deck is Bioblight. There are no copies of that card in the main deck. So we're going to start attacking here a little bit. I'll start pushing through a little bit of damage. He's able to do that.
And Elliott can't really block in that spot with the Wayfinder because then the Tassiger activations get worse again. There's another piece of garbage for him to get back.
We're going to get a Soul activation. And that will allow Wolchesky to bring back 3 copies of Siege Rhino. Wolchesky will draw. Temple of Maladies the draw. It seems like if Wolchesky gets against other Abzan decks, he's going to be really, really well positioned, actually, this weekend.
I think so, too. His deck is just very poorly set up game 1 to fight the Dissolve matchup.
There is Siege Rhino. Puts a little bit of an interesting twist on the game if Reid wants to let these resolve. And maybe take a more aggressive stance on the game.
Mm-hmm. Also keep in mind, Reid has 2 main deck copies of Secure the Waste, so he just might be setting up an end of turn Secure for a bunch.
Sure.
On tap.
Very Decree of Justice-esque.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's one of your top 8 cards. You don't seem like a Decree of Justice guy to me.
No, I do have some PTQ top 8s with Decree of Justice, but no. Not really a Decree of Justice guy.
Here are the attacks. There are the blocks. And it looks like we'll have a Sylvan Carry added. You mentioned Secure the Waste. There it is. It's for a whole bunch.
We're going to test the limits of how many Soldier Tokens we have available,
yes,
I think.
Yes, we are. Going to tick down here with the Elspeth. Get those big creatures out of the way. Attack with all these Soldier Tokens. Keep in mind there are a lot more out there because of Secure the Waste. There's a Tranquil Cove. And there's a couple. Yeah, turn all those sideways. Secure the Waste is an interesting addition to this blue-white control deck as far as the win condition is concerned.
It might be one of the better ways to win at instant speed. You can also do it against decks like Mono Red for 2 or 3 in the middle turns and do a lot of blocking. So it was definitely powerful there, and I don't even think this is necessarily the matchup that Reid wants it for.
Siege Rhino gets dissolved, Wolchesky will concede, and Reid Duke's going to win game number 1 here over Elliott Wolchesky. Blue-white control, up a game over Abzan mid-range as we take a look at the sideboards. That's where Elliott's going, that's where we're going. You'll find 3 copies of Nyx Fleece Ram, a Hornet's Nest, 2 Drown in Sorrow, an End Hostilities, a Dune Blast, a Reclamation Sage, 4 Thoughtseize, an Arbor Colossus, and a Hornet Queen. Thoughtseize the big one.
Yeah, Elliott is a little light for this matchup in the sideboard, too. I would have anticipated a lot more action in the sideboard, given that he doesn't have a lot going on for the Dissolve matchup. The only thing that's for sure coming in here are the 4 copies of Thoughtseize. As you mentioned, they're very good. I think the Reclamation Sage will come in as well, because Perilous Vault is problematic for Elliott, and he's got a lot of easy cuts to make here as well. Maybe you see the Hornet Queen come in as just another top-end threat, but besides the 4 Thoughtseizes, I'm not confident anything really comes in. I think it's very likely the Reclamation Sage does, but after that, I think he's got very, very little.
What do we see on Reid's side?
2 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 copies of Negate, 2 copies of Racy Alarm, 2 copies of Surge of Righteousness, a Nyx Fleece Ram, a Valorous Dance, a Glare of Heresy, an Ugin, an End Hostilities, a Radiant Purge, and a Treasure Cruise. Reid's got some great options here. I think the extra copies of Disable Stroke certainly come in. Elliott's got a lot of expensive stuff. I could see maybe going up to a 3rd copy of Negate. I think 4 is a lot, but I wouldn't want to cut them in this matchup. Elliott's got enough high-impact, expensive spells. Past that, I really like the Valorous Stance, the additional copy of End Hostilities, the Treasure Cruise, and the Ugin. All good for attrition-based matchups and matchups where your opponent's playing to the board. So Reid could be bringing in upwards of 7 or 8 cards here.
Season 2 is certainly underway here on the Open Series as we are in Providence. We'll take a look at our schedule right now. We were in Syracuse a couple weeks ago. We're in Providence now. Next weekend, hometown, baby.
Oh, the first time that I've been to Cleveland for a Magic event since I think 2001. We'll be hanging out there. After that, we're going to Portland again. This is the event that got moved from Seattle, is now in Portland, May 2nd and 3rd. After Portland, we head on over to Dallas. I knew that one. After that, Worcester for Legacy, and then the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus, Ohio, tied to the Origins Game Fair. Modern and Standard will be the Invitational formats, and a two-day, $20,000 Modern Open Series event, June 5th through 7th.
And all of these events, you can pick up the fantastic Polar Punch playmat that is available. All of our players got one of those here, of course, in Syracuse as well. So not a ton of dates to be able to get this thing. And you can only get them at the Open Series when you do sign up. So you're not going to be able to find these available for purchase, free limited edition playmat until May 23rd.
Yeah, and no strings attached to this one. It is just free whenever you register, so might as well sign up.
Simple, straightforward, and pretty cool, too.
Yep.
Of course you know the Dallas date. That's your first weekend off for the year.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is right. That's why I was not it wasn't immediately coming to me, because that's my first show off.
Yeah. Just put your feet up and do a lot of nothing.
That's actually not true.
Oh.
I have to help pack up my girlfriend's apartment and drive a U-Haul from Oakland to Los Angeles.
That sounds like so much fun.
So it's actually not really a weekend off, but
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
These are the choices that we make.
Just graduating from grad school, it's
Yep.
a big weekend, you know. It's
You
fine.
hauling it all down, baby.
Yep.
I'll be in Dallas with Matthias Hunt for that show.
Mhm.
Love going to Dallas. Hopefully we're in the arena, too. I know you guys were there. You guys were in the arena the last time.
The Thunderdome?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the arena.
Yeah, it's a cool venue.
Yeah.
It's a lot different.
I think my second show ever doing coverage was in the Thunderdome, as you so eloquently put it.
It's a sports arena, and there's seating. There's stadium seating around.
Yes. No,
So-
it's great. I'm a huge fan.
We walk in, and there's two people, an older couple, and they're in University of Oklahoma gear, and they're just sitting in the seats watching. I'm like, oh, we got scouts.
Looking for the next hot talent.
Yeah, exactly.
Wolchesky will be on the play here for game number 2, as he was soundly defeated in game 1 there by Duke. And it looks like he'll go back to the drawing board here. Going to take a mulligan.
Bad news for Elliott in a matchup that's a lot about one-for-one trading.
The big question here about this blue-white control deck is the white better than the black? As blue-black control, very popular at the Pro Tour.
So we'll take a look at the cards that Reid gets in white. He gets access to Secure the Waste, Dragon Lord Ojutai, and Hostilities instead of Crux of Fate. So, and Elspeth. So those are the big prizes. These feel like more powerful cards for the very long matchups. And Hostilities pretty potent against the mid-range decks. Elspeth very potent against the mid-range decks.
Definitely some nice options across the two colors.
Yeah.
Could just be what you think's going to show up at the tournament, really.
It just is a question of how much do you want Thought Seeds.
Sure.
I think is what it, or Duress or those kind of effects.
Ashiok, too.
Yep.
Which Planeswalker do you feel is better? I know Adrian Sullivan always been a pretty big Ashiok guy.
Hero's Downfall. That's another card that you give up. It's probably why you see a couple copies of things like Main Deck Negate. It's because Reid is not as strong against Planeswalkers as the blue-black build because he can't discard, get them out of the hand preemptively or Hero's Downfall them, so he's got to just be able to counter them.
Wolchesky found a 6 that he was happy enough with, so game number 2 underway. He started with the Sandstep Citadel. Duke played Nylon in his first turn. And now Wolchesky going to go to 19 as he sacrificed a Windswept piece. So a Plains or a Forest on the way. And it will be a Forest. So we'll see what the turn 2 play will be. Wolchesky does have quite a few options in this deck with Caryatid, Sylvan Wayfinder, or Commune with the Gods. Commune with the Gods, it will be Nyx Weaver, Tassiger, Soul of Innistrad, Windswept Teeth, and Thoughtseize are the 5 cards.
The problem is all those turn 2 plays that you mentioned aren't really things that are impacting the board or pressuring Reid or attacking his hand. And this sets up Elliott for this kind of game where he's doing stuff, he's filling up his graveyard, it looks like he's doing powerful things, and then Disdainful Strokes and Dissolves eat up whatever his actual payouts are.
Nyx Weaver was the selection off the Commune with the Gods. There is land number 3. Here's Nyx Weaver number 1. That'll resolve. We'll head back Duke's way. An island and a passing of the turn. Wolchesky will turn over 2 cards thanks to the Nyx Weaver Trigger. Arbor Colossus and Windswept Heath are those cards. The draw for the turn is a Plains.
So if Arbor Colossus came in, I assume that means that Elliott's just got dead weight in his main deck, or feels that he has dead weight in his main deck, and just needs to bring in stuff, because this is not the kind of matchup you typically associate with Arbor Colossus.
Yeah, he does have some stinkers in here. Hero's Downfall is okay. Murderous Cut and Silence Lose are pretty bad. Depends on his opinions on C, the Unwritten as well. It's a very expensive spell. Land number 4 will allow him to cast Siege Rhino number 1. We'll see if Duke has a counter spell for that or not. And he does with Disdainful Stroke. Reid will untap and take a draw. Land number 4 could be an island here, and it will be. He'll pass the turn back over to Wolchesky. Nyx Weaver Trigger will turn over a Temple of Malady and a See the Unwritten. We'll take a draw. It's an Urborg.
So this is getting Elliott to a spot where he's going to be able to activate Soul of Innistrad very soon.
Yes.
And that is an important element for Elliott in the matchup. Is the one thing that allows him to really generate a source of card advantage that's comparable to what Reid does. But it is a very slow burn.
Secure the Waste has been cast. 3 soldier tokens. I think we may see a triple block here as Nyx Weaver is a 2/3 after all.
Now, Elliott does have the option of sacrificing the Nyx Weaver and get something out of his graveyard.
Absolutely.
I think this might be a spot where getting back Thoughtseize seems pretty nice. You can get back the Thoughtseize Reid, then set up Soul of Innistrad. If Reid's hand's a little bit softer, there's only 1 payoff card, then you start recasting the Siege Rhinos. Could be really solid.
The selection is Thoughtseize off the Nyx Weaver. There's Urborg. Here is Thoughtseize. See what Duke is up to. You got a Disdainful Stroke, a Dragonlord Ochitai, a Radiant Fountain, and Hostilities, and an Elspeth Sun's Champion. You'll note only 1 white mana in play right now for Duke.
And I think that Elliott, he's going to be hard pressed to push through these white cards, even if he is able to activate Soul of Innistrad and get back some high impact cards. So he might just have to say, I hope that Reid doesn't draw double white for a while. I use Soul of Innistrad, get back some stuff, deploy it, and overwhelm Reid a little bit before he can find the second white mana. The problem is, if Elliott says takes Disdainful Stroke, well then Reid can just go untap, play Dragonlord Ochitai, and then just race the Soul of Innistrad activation. So Elliott's actually kind of forced to take the Dragonlord here, which you see, leaving Disdainful Stroke in Reid's hand, which is bad news for the Soul of Innistrad line.
Yeah.
But Elliott might not just be able to beat Dragonlord Ochitai hitting him a bunch of times. So his hand's a little bit forced there.
Now here's Tassiger. Able to play that and not take any damage thanks to Urborg. Plenty of cards, of course, to delve away. Radiant Fountain will enter the battlefield very quickly. Reid will gain 2 life. And he'll just pass the turn back over to Wolchesky. So Wolchesky will draw. Siege Rhino is what he's found. Tasker are going to come into the red zone. There will be a chump block. There's a Sandstep Citadel for the land.
And now Elliott's got a lot of taxes on his mana right now. He's got the Soul in the graveyard, he's got the Tassiger in place, Siege Rhino in hand. So how he wants to measure these threats while Reid is still on the 1 white mana is pretty tricky.
That is the big question. Reid going to come in here, get a little chip shot in, pass the turn back. It looks like it will be a Soul activation. So he'll go that route first. Arbor Colossus, Tassiger, and Siege Rhino are the cards Wolchesky will take. Wants to clean up that graveyard too for Tassiger.
Yep.
Siege Rhino the draw.
Again, these are all demands on Elliott's mana. He probably can't activate the Tassiger a bunch because he needs to get some of the stuff out of his hand. But if he's just deploying the stuff out of his hand, well, that makes End Hostilities or Elspeth coming into play and minusing Elliott's board very problematic lines for Elliott.
Both cards that Elliott knows about.
Exactly. Reid can't cast them right now, still on the 1 white mana, but eventually that changes.
Siege Rhino. Gonna get hit with Disdainful Stroke. Card that Wolchesky did know about as well. All that information picked up thanks to Thoughtseize. He's got to kind of slog his way through that stuff.
Elliott's hand right now is very chunky. It's very hard for him to deploy multiple cards in a turn. It's not even clear that he wants to deploy multiple cards in a turn because of the sweepers that are in hand.
3 mana will allow him to play another Tasigur. However, that is legendary, so he's going to lose the first Tasigur. Not sure if that's on purpose or not.
I suspect that was not.
No? Either way, that's the play that was made as we head back Duke's way.
I mean, I don't mind 2 spells in 1 turn there if you can get it going, but not those 2 spells.
Sure. Here's a Treasure Cruise from Reid. And there's a Haven of the Spirit Dragon and a passing of the turn. Wolchesky will draw. It's a Plains. Here comes Tasigur. Reid will take that hit. Go down to 16. 8 lands means that now you are in 2 spell per turn territory or spell plus Tasigur activation territory.
Well, Elliott can't even be sure that Reid did not find a second white.
Yep.
Reid could be slow rolling a Plains out of his hand here and just playing the Haven last turn as his land.
That's why I think it's very difficult to deploy that out of Siege Rhino, if that's the case.
I actually disagree. I think that Elliott just needs to play out his hand in that spot.
Okay.
Because I don't think he can win this game taking that much time.
Sure.
I think that if I'm in Elliott's spot, I'm just crossing my fingers, hoping Reid does not have a second white source of mana, and then it's very realistic Elliott wins the game. But I think trying to walk the tightrope here of leaving some stuff left over while adding enough to a board, while Reid has a chump blocker left over and a handful of spells, I just don't think that's working.
There are also some pretty bad hits with the Tasigur there,
Yeah.
too. Like, Satyr Wayfinder is not a great hit in this situation.
It's super risky because if Reid untaps and plays a second white source of mana and sweeps your board, you're just dead. But I think that Elliott's probably dead if Reid has a second white source of mana, even if he's slow rolling his threats, because Reid's been sitting here drawing cards for so long. I think Elliott's going to be hard pressed to beat the leftovers.
Wolchesky considering casting that Satyr Wayfinder. Reid going to tap a bunch of mana, so this could be a dig through time perhaps. It is. Take a look at the top 7, of course, take 2 with him. A lot of options here for Reid. We'll see what he does want to take here in this situation. Going to consult his hand first.
So now at this point, Elliott can't add to the board because Reid played the Tranquil Cove, and so he knows that Reid's going to have access to End Hostilities and Elspeth next turn. But going back to the previous turn, I think it's just too unlikely that those follow-ups matter. Either Reid doesn't hit the second white source of mana and you win, and in that case you're better served just casting your stuff because you want to win as fast as possible. Or Reid has a second white source of mana, and then I just don't think it matters because it's going to be too hard to win.
Sure. Two cards selected. 5 go to the bottom. Time to untap and take a draw. Looks like Radiant Fountain was the draw step for the turn.
So now you're potentially entering, End Hostilities plus Dissolve as the turn.
That's horrible news.
And, or some variation of that, Disdainful Stroke, Nullify, what have you.
Six mana looks like it's Elspeth, and it is. Elevator goes down, blow those creatures up. We'll see some Tasigur activations here. At least one.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Sandstorm Citadel and Commune with the Gods turned over. So Commune, Courser, and Tasigur are the options. Commune will go back. Another activation here. Temple of Silence and Courser prefix. Courser will be added.
And I think that Reid's happy to give Elliott anything that can't attack through Elspeth.
Yep.
And remember, Reid's still sitting on End Hostility as well. So even if Elliott's able to generate some tramplers or make the game about something else, Reid can still clean it up.
A Johnny Mentor of Heroes the draw. Here is 3 mana. Courser is where Wolchesky will start. Top card, Soul of Innistrad. So the follow. It'll be a Satyr Wayfinder. Going to push that soul into the graveyard, among other things here. Satyr Wayfinder is card number 2. Sidisi's card 3. And Temple of Melody is card number 4. Top card after that is a copy of Temple of Melody. Keep in mind, Wolchesky has not played a land yet this turn. So he will play the Temple off the top of his library. Trigger the Courser, gain a life, time to scry as well. So we'll see this card, which is the Thoughtseize. That's probably going to stay there.
Yeah, that's Elliott's best card in this spot. His hand is chock full of threats. So being able to take out Reid's best defense or know where Reid's vulnerabilities lie, that's really important right now for Elliott. So I can't imagine that Thoughtseize getting scryed away. At this point, it might be really the only card Reid cares about as well, on the other side of the table.
Reid might feel he can beat all the creatures.
And most of Elliott's powerful cards here are so expensive mana-wise that Dissolves, Disdainful Strokes, and Negates are very effective. But Thoughtseize, very efficient.
Elspeth ticks up, Soldiers in play. Radiant Fountain enters the battlefield as well. It's a little bit of life gained. Reid now will deploy Perilous Vault with the necessary mana to activate it.
Yep. This is another part of the Vice script that Reid is setting up right now. And it means that it's still hard-pressed for Elliott to be able to, deploy enough stuff to threaten Reid while having enough left over to survive the sweepers. It's asking a lot.
Thoughtseize was the top card of the deck last turn. It's the top card of the deck this turn now as well. Reid going to dissolve the first Thoughtseize, but he also knows that there's probably another one coming next turn. No guarantee that Elliott casts it next turn, or perhaps he mills his way past it. We'll see what his actions are. But that first one was important enough, to counter.
And I can't imagine Elliott giving up on Thoughtseize at this spot, because it is the only thing that he has really going on.
Johnny. Reid says that's fine.
Yeah, Reid might say, well, I don't care about you putting counters on your guys, and if you're plussing a Johnny this turn, that means you're probably not drawing a Thoughtseize.
This is true.
This also just gets chewed up by the Perilous Vault, so...
Doesn't really care too much about that, it seems.
Yeah.
Let's say their Wayfinder's now 4-4. Here are the attacks. And Reid just got a double chump block. Doesn't even really matter where they're going, towards his life total or Elspeth. He's blocking. Duke will untap. Time to take a draw. Looks like it was a dig through time that he picked up. And hostility still in the hand here for Reid. Perilous Vault in play. So he continuously has the ability to kind of sweep away these creatures. So Johnny is a bit of a presence at this point, but I'm kind of with you. I don't think it has a huge effect on things for Reid's decision making.
Reid does not have to answer this immediately. He can probably squeeze a little bit more out of Elliott here before having to do anything with the Ajani. Because within hostilities in hand and the Perilous Vault in play, he can contain most of what Ajani can produce. And he doesn't really have to care about the ultimate very much as well. He can win through that thing. He can deck Elliott or go ultimate with Elspeth and generate a bunch of tokens. There's no rush for him to get Ajani off the board. He can take his time.
Dig through time here for Reid. He's made his selection. That means 5 cards go to the bottom. 2 are in his hand now. Elspeth's going to take up 3 more soldier tokens. And he's happy to pass the turn back over to Wolchesky. Thoughtseize the draw. Satyr Wayfinder on top. Wolchesky last turn let out with Thoughtseize. We'll see if he does so again here.
This would also be a really good spot for one of Elliott's. If he brought in the Reclamation Sage in his sideboard, that would be very potent here as well. Because a lot of what Reid is doing here is leaning on the fact that he has Perilous Vault as a catch-up in case things get too bad. So if Elliott blows that up, all of a sudden, Reid's game plan might go down the toilet a little bit, depending on how much he's leaning on the vault.
You saw the Temple put the top card to the bottom. It was a Satyr Wayfinder, so now the top card of the deck is a Windswept Heath. Wolchesky's hand there with Arbor Colossus, Commune with the Gods, Satyr Wayfinder. That Thoughtseize, which is clearly very important, and a Siege Rhino. Looks like it might be Siege Rhino time. It is. Wolchesky might be trying to get to a board here that Reid has to minus Elspeth on to lose Elspeth.
The problem is that Elliott's still aware that Reid has end hostilities as well.
Yep.
So there's a lot of different routes for Reid to answer whatever Elliott's line of plays are.
There's a Thoughtseize. And Reid will show off the hand, Disdainful Stroke, and Hostilities, 2 of them, along with another copy of Perilous Vault, and Anticipate, and an Elspeth. So a very, very good hand for Reid.
Very answer dense. And,
really doesn't come as much of a surprise when he's resolved a couple copies of Dig Through Time.
Yep.
It's almost impossible to select the right card here in this situation. Everything's so redundant. The selection is Elspeth, however.
If he's selecting Elspeth, I think that implies Elliott feels that he can remove the other Elspeth from the table. Because it doesn't really make much sense otherwise.
Sure.
But I don't know if that's going to be happening unless Elliott's planning on deploying so much to the board that Reid is forced to use the Perilous Vault. But with 2 copies of End Hostilities in hand, that feels unlikely.
A Johnny activation distributes some +1/+1 counters across Wolchesky's creatures. Quick blocks there from Reid. Again, chump blocking no matter where it's attacking. That is a Commune with the Gods. A couple of cards here.
I was a little interested to see the distribution of counters in that spot from Elliott rather than just looking at cards. Because with the Siege Rhino being deployed, Reid probably just has to cast End Hostilities next turn regardless. So I don't think you're really getting much that turn because Reid can chump block your non-tramplers like he was probably going to do anyway, untap and hit you with End Hostilities.
Anticipate is done resolving there for Reid. So he'll take a draw. I think we're going to probably see Reid do a little bit of attacking here, potentially. He can get a little cute here, too, with Activate Elspeth. Elspeth activation on the stack below Perilous Vault. So then he gets to leave the 3 soldiers behind. That's what we're going to see. So he clears up the entire board. Pretty adorable.
It's a cute play.
Ask me. And now he's got mana up to counter some spells that he may deem relevant.
And you can just see the difference in the way that card advantage can manifest in this sort of game. Elliott's got plenty of card advantage too. He's got Soul of Innistrad, he's got Courser Krufix and so forth. But a lot of his card advantage is slow, it is ponderous, and it's not hard for Reid to just undo all of it or generate his own card advantage quicker and more efficiently. So Elliott has, technically 3 for 1 once with Soul of Innistrad. He can do that again. But that doesn't necessarily equate to the card advantage that Reid's generating, even if in terms of raw card count, it's a similar number of cards.
Yeah.
Reid's is just much more streamlined.
Of course, there's finding some lands here, and it's kind of doing its thing, but it's certainly not the same.
Exactly. Yes, that's happening, but that doesn't really matter all that much. It's not like mana is the bottleneck at this point for either player.
Seder Wayfinder finds a Temple of Malady. Top card now is Hornet Queen for Wolchesky. Let's not forget that Reid still does have that copy of End Hostilities in hand. Just waiting.
Also, when Elliott goes and does something like cast Soul of Innistrad, he's getting back these expensive creatures and deploying them over the course of several turns. So it takes a long time for that card advantage to actually manifest. And in the meantime, Reid is drawing cards, setting up sweepers, deploying Elspeth, so on and so forth.
And I believe Reid may have found his copy of Ugin off of that Anticipate. And if that's the case, winning gets very difficult. But Perilous Vault will continue to make things very hard here for Wolchesky. As Reid can continue just to set up shop. Now, this doesn't really come as much of a surprise, but Twitter has informed us that Reid is actually playing the deck that Andrew Cuneo played at the Pro Tour. And this looks very Cuneo-esque.
I don't know. There's 3 copies of Elspeth.
There are a few more win conditions that I think Cuneo would like.
2 copies of Dragonlord Ochitai. I mean,
Yeah.
this deck can actually attack someone for lethal damage.
Again,
So,
a little more aggressive than Cuneo would like. If it were up to Andrew, he would have 1 Elspeth. I am sure.
no, it would be like 1 Felden's Cane.
Ah, yes, yes. Well, Cranial Archive is legal.
Yep.
So maybe Cuneo goes back to the drawing board. You saw a Soul of Innistrad activation, Hornet Queen, the draw, Hero's Downfall on top of the deck. So again, Wolchesky with plenty of cards and options in hand, but Reid just has all the answers for those cards. There's Sidisi. And Reid says, that is fine. You may exploit, you may search. No fear whatsoever of the 4-6.
You get a look here. Elliott's deck size is definitely becoming a factor.
Not a lot left over there.
I mean, Reid may be able to potentially just play defense long enough for Elliott to get decked.
Now that is how Cuneo wants things done.
Yeah.
And even Wolchesky right now actually having some difficulty selecting an option. He's just going to go with Siege Rhino. Perhaps Reid aware that, hey, what's the worst that you could do? If it's a Siege Rhino, I don't care all that much.
Might be one of those spots where Reid feels like he can just answer whatever the follow-up is.
Absolutely.
So, and if nothing else, it's one less card in Elliott's deck.
True. Of course, we'll get chump blocked by a soldier token.
Also, if I got the correct look, I think Elliott did not bring in his copy of Reclamation Sage, which means his Perilous Vault's just going to be a thing.
Just going to be there causing problems the entire time. Vault's such an interesting card to me because, you know, in this day and age with Magic, you're always looking for the most efficient cards possible. I mean, Tasker is a one-mana threat that you can activate in the same turn. Perilous Vault, there's nothing particularly efficient about it. 4 to deploy, 5 to activate. But it has such an effect on the games where it's good.
Well, Elliott's deck is nothing but 4 and 5 mana permanents. So Perilous Vault's going to be good. It's going to be in these sort of games.
And it has been magnificent in the previous one and this one as well. Temple of Lightning puts the top card to the bottom, and Reid is just happy to pass the turn back yet again.
It's a little slow for the mono red style matchups, but for these kind of games, I mean, it's caused Elliott all sorts of headaches. He's not been able to slog through this card very efficiently.
And Exile's a big deal with that card too.
Yes.
They're the chump blocks. And with the Vault just sitting there in play, it is unlikely that Wolchesky can actually deploy anything else this turn. He does have a Tasker that he can activate and do all that stuff, and that's all well and good, but...
Well, the Tasker activation is troubled because he's got some junk in the graveyard, and his deck is running out.
Yep.
So he also just needs to be casting his stuff. He can only spend so much mana into Tasker right now because his board, as currently constructed, is not going to be good enough to win this game.
The old rock in a hard place. And hostilities? Yes, sir.
And you can see Reid understands how problematic Vault is for Elliott in this matchup. He's not sacrificing it unless he has to.
Active player
There's just no proof that Elliott can get off the table.
It allows him to interact at instant speed, and it allows him to interact against something like Whip of Erebos or a haste threat, whatever, something random that sneaks through.
Once again, that is the end of
There's Tasker. So he'll delve away a bunch of cards. Wants to leave Thoughtseize down there. That one's pretty important in this matchup, especially if he can get it back. The follow-up here is a Hornet Queen. That's fine too, 4 insects. Temple, top card. Looks like that'll stay on top. Underneath 2 minutes here in this match. As Duke will untap, take a draw. It is game 2, of course. Reid did win game 1. And hostilities will clear everything up. Pass that turn back. Wolchesky will draw. He did leave a card on top. It was a Courser. He'll deploy that Courser. Take a look at the top card now. It's a Forest. Actually risky for him to take the Forest and put it on the battlefield, but he will. Sidisi on top now.
I think if you're at the point where you can't play the land off the Courser, you scry to the bottom of the last turn.
Yeah.
So one or the other.
Let's see what the follow-up is here. Arbor Colossus. Reid with a few cards in hand here. See if he wants to fight over that. He won't. He'll untap. Perilous Vault still in play. He'll draw. Looks like he's saving the counter spells for the Siege Rhinos that he knows about.
Yeah, Reid's at 7, so his life total is an issue here.
It's Elspeth. It's going up.
And everything else that Elliott does, he can kind of interact with, you know, on a turn delay. He can use Perilous Vault or a sweeper or some such. The Siege Rhino is the one thing that's problematic in an immediate sense. Sidisi Undead Vizier, also potentially a card that Reid would want to be able to interact with right away.
A couple chump blocks. The kind of security that Elspeth does provide. Wolchesky. A lot of expensive threats to play. Sidisi, Soul of Innistrad among them. Just trying to figure out how he wants to go about putting these cards into play, as it is turn 0 now of extra turns. So he's got to try to figure out a way to deal 7 points of damage over the course of 3 turns. Turn 0, turn 2, and turn 4. And this is turn 0, so he's really only got 2 turns to do it in.
Given how many cards Reid's looked at, the Perilous Vault still in play, you have to imagine it involves casting 3 Siege Rhinos. He's got 2 in his hand. He's got the Soul of Innistrad in his hand. I think that's his path. If he's going to win the game, it has to involve that, because I think that combat's off the table.
There's Siege Rhino. That's in. Well, Jesse's life total, him getting life, doesn't really matter.
No.
Reid losing life, that does actually matter. So he's down to 4. What's next here for Elliott? It's 5 mana. It's Sidisi. With 4 mana left over to cast a Siege Rhino. So there's the exploit, sacrificing the Courser. Ciderware Final, of course, be turned down. Wolchesky will get to search through his deck. He very quickly grabbed a copy of Hero's Downfall. Does not have a lot of deck to shuffle. That looks like it might be 3 or 4 cards.
Yeah, I guess Hero's Downfall, I suppose the card to take here, though, Elliott's putting Reid in a position where Reid might have to blow the Perilous Vault anyway. So I don't know how much the Downfall really does, but the rest of his deck offered nothing in that spot.
Ticking down to kill all the creatures will work just fine there for Elspeth. And this is turn 1 of extra turns. Duke will just pass the turn back.
All players in
There's the
draft
Downfall.
number 2, please.
And I think that if you were going to take a downfall there with Sidisi, you had to downfall this Elspeth before Reid gets to his
I think so
turn.
too. That was a little strange.
You might be able to get a Perilous Ball activation out of him, and then at that point, a lot of other cards are freed up to potentially have an impact on turn 4, your random creatures. It's unlikely, but that sequence was not particularly tight from Elliott.
A lot of mana here for Wolchesky. This is turn 2 of extra turns. So there's Soul. Reid says that's fine. And Wolchesky just has to pass because he wants to be able to activate Soul as well. Turn 3. Temple, top card. Becomes bottom card. Pass it. Reid just doing nothing. Just answering his opponent, that's it.
He's at 4, which is really important because that means that it requires a second Siege Rhino to get the job done. He has a Chump Blocker in play for the Soul of Innistrad and a Perilous Vault, so he doesn't have to worry about getting attacked to death.
Yep.
And Elliott doesn't even have a bunch of Rhinos in his graveyard to go crazy with, so Reid's only got to be able to win the fight here over one of them.
It's turn 4. This is the turn that Reid's got to make it through. He makes it through this one, he wins the match. A Johnny the draw, completely irrelevant. The attack will get stuffed here in just a moment, I imagine. Elliott with no thought sees to lead the way here.
Yeah, his hand's got just 2 Siege Rhinos, both of which have to resolve, and a bunch of creatures that don't matter. So, his hand, even though it's full of cards, is really only 2 cards that make any difference here. These are Siege Rhinos. I think if either gets countered, he doesn't have a way to get back the Rhino with Soul and cast 2 in one turn. So,
Disdainful Stroke will take care of the first Rhino. And even though Wolchesky does have a lot of different cards in hand, he's got a Hornet Queen, Arbor Colossus, a Tasigur, a Giant. The only cards that matter were the Siege Rhinos.
yeah, that's it. Nothing else in his hand impacts this turn, and it's the last one that Elliott gets.
So Wolchesky's going to look over some things here and see if there is a way for him to potentially win this game. You know Reid's going to block.
Yeah, I guess Reid saying no block is a way out.
That's an out in this situation.
Now I think there's nothing to do.
Surprisingly, that did not occur. Reid did see the block. And now Wolchesky will go through the motions here. We might see another Soul activation. But again, with this being the 4th turn of the game for him, and Reid getting turn number 5, it looks like Reid Duke will be the winner of this match here momentarily. Looks like there's another Siege Rhino. And he says, that's fine, I'll go to 1. But 1 is not none, as we say here in the booth. So Wolchesky will have to discard. Reid will untap. He'll blow his Perilous Vault, all that jazz. But assuming we have everything correct here, which leads me to believe that we do, Reid will untap. It's turn number 5. He'll draw. He'll play a land. That's it. And that is going, that should do it, I believe. That's turn number 5. Yeah. I believe that is being explained right now. So Reid does win the match over Elliott Wolchesky. 1 game to 0. One of them is a draw. But either way, he does get the W here. 3 more points added to Duke. So he has 2-0 in this tournament. Blue Eye Control taking care of Abzan mid-range.
And I think that's just going to be a challenging matchup for an Abzan mid-range deck that's constructed the way that Elliott's is. No discard game 1. Pretty slow, cumbersome deck. Probably very good against other mid-range decks. He's a lot of powerful Graveyard Matter synergies going on, and kind of the structure you'd want for the mirror match. But against the Dissolve deck, I think Elliott's just not got very much going on.
Well, we will bring it back to the booth here, as that is the